Hey, love bugs. It's episode 2 of Scene with Serena Kumara. I'm Serena, and this is a podcast about coming home to ourselves, the unlearning, the remembering, and the returning to all that has always been true about who we are and what we deserve. And most days, I just get on this mic and say the things that I know that I need to hear in case you need to hear them too. And today, it's about self-kindness. If you spend any time at all in these wellness spaces, these healing spaces, it's highly likely that you've heard someone end a class with "be kind to yourselves" or seen a sign on the wall. And I think that is beautiful. But what I don't hear as often is what that actually looks like. And I feel like it may seem like it's self-explanatory, but in my experience, it actually is much more layered than people realize. If you missed the first episode, I discussed my year, whatever I want, and it's the year that I gave up on self-improvement and moved more into just following my joy. And that is where my relationship with self-kindness really changed. I learned how long I had been operating in self-unkindness and how sort of normal that is for so many of us. So today we're going to talk about what self-kindness really is, why so many of us struggle with it, and that's actually deeper than you might think, and some things that I've been doing to get better at it. Self-kindness is an intentional and constant decision to treat yourself with gentleness and compassion, to care for your needs without judgment or guilt, to give yourself grace when you're not so proud of the decisions you're making and you feel out of alignment. It's treating yourself with love when you could be harsh with yourself. It's treating yourself as worthy, whether you feel like you're behind, out of alignment, or on the right track. And it's about treating yourself with softness instead of shame. And I'm going to be really honest, as I was preparing for this episode, the theme of shame felt really, really big. I feel like shame is probably the biggest, if not the only reason why we struggle with self-compassion. But what I have found really interesting is that the roots of our shame don't belong to us. There are actually studies that show that self-kindness has positive implications for like mental health. It can actually rewire your brain, physical health, things like inflammation. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm going to leave it there. You can do your own research, but there are real implications as to why self-kindness needs to become our baseline just for our overall well-being. And so even though it's super important, it's not the easiest thing to do. And I think it's also not the norm. And I really want to get into why it's not. And I'm just going to give you this spoiler alert. All of the reasons on this list boil down to colonization, colonial frameworks, and the systems of power that they created. Essentially, what I mean is that the norms and the values and the expectations that generally most of us were raised in around work, rest, worth, gender, control, emotion, were shaped by systems built to prioritize productivity and control to benefit a very specific group. And because everything that we exist in was built in that system, we have internalized so much of it over generations that it has just become societal norms. So we don't think about it as this is an effect of colonization. We think of it as this is just how it is. And it absolutely impacts the way we see ourselves and treat ourselves, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And I am sharing this because this is the kind of information that allowed me to do that radical self-care and self-discovery work that really helped me to have a perspective to be able to actually heal, unlearn the things that weren't serving me, and push against the system that don't want me to love myself. Now we're starting here because everything else kind of flows from here. That little voice in your head that tells you, that you're lazy or you're behind or you should work harder, you're not being productive or you're too much or you're too little or all of the things. Because it's in your head, it can feel like it's your voice. It can feel like a nudge, but it isn't yours. Over time, if you hear the same kinds of messages, which we do, right? Because we have these societal norms. So at your school, you hear the same kind of messaging, at your house, at your church. Over time, especially when we're little, when it gets ingrained in us so much, it can start to just feel like it's a part of ourselves. And so what happens over time is our inner voice starts to be really hostile. So it can look like criticizing ourselves harshly automatically for making a mistake, feeling like you shouldn't have done that, right? Holding yourself to really impossible standards, and sometimes being more gracious to others, but sometimes not. Downplaying your wins before anyone else can, and then kind of like rehearsing your self-worth out loud as if you're trying to convince yourself or like sell yourself, because there's this idea that there's something you have to say, do, or be in order to be worthy, and that you need to convince someone else of it. It's just not innately seen. That kind of relationship with your inner voice can make it hard to actually hear your actual self because it's being drowned out by what feels like one voice, but it's really multiple voices. And that can make it hard for you to speak kindly to yourself because you don't know where to start. You haven't heard it before. Number two feels very particularly personal to me, and it's that we're shaped by very narrow definitions of what is right. And that's with regards to, how you look or how you behave, how you think, how you learn, all of the things. It's a very clear setup for what is right and typical, and everything else outside of that is wrong or problematic. And so that can eat away at the way you view yourself and the way you treat yourself. It can cause you to be really judgmental and harsh with yourself, compare yourself to other people. And it's really hard to speak to yourself kindly when you're kind of constantly in this space of shame and self-judgment and trying to strive to be something that maybe doesn't come as naturally. It can force you to work at a pace that doesn't feel natural to you. And it can give you shame for your needs, like needing to take a break or rest or to ask a question twice. And that doesn't aid in your self-esteem, which makes it hard to speak to yourself or treat yourself with kindness. Third, we were trained and expected to go against our nature. So yes, that does align with what we were talking about with having like one very narrow view of what's right in terms of the kind of person you are and the way you work, right? And so anything that's outside of that, you're kind of trained to go against what feels natural so you can fit into that box. But this is also about overriding instincts in terms of arts. So self-kindness is not just about speaking to yourself kindly. It's about caring for your needs, which includes like physical, spiritual, etc. And the creators of those systems really just needed bodies that could be molded and controlled and kind of do what they're told without listening to themselves at all. So things like intuition, body signals, emotions, rhythms, those became pesky problems that needed to be solved. And so they were. Over all of this time is that disconnection from our body and our spirits. If you look at yourself, you may find that you override the messages that your body or your spirit is trying to tell you. So for example, I'm not saying you do it, but do you ever find yourself maybe like feeling hungry, but overriding that because you got to get this done, or feeling sleepy and saying, I'll take a nap after this is finished? No, me neither. Okay. Because that's connected to that. It can also look like, suppressing natural bodily urges like crying or just taking a pause. And a lot of people do that. That's natural. That's a release. It's necessary, right? Sometimes second guessing your intuition. I think that's a big one. There's a lot of conditioning that convinces us that our inner knowing isn't as powerful as it is. And you might need external validation, or you need to ask somebody else what they think, get a second opinion, speak to somebody that you trust. You can't trust yourself. That is all connected to that. And then acting like or feeling like your needs are inconvenient. And I struggle with that one myself. I get so frustrated when I'm like sleepy or tired. And I'm a projector in human design. If you know, you know. I get so frustrated with like, oh my God, I just want to get all this done, but I'm tired. It's so inconvenient. But that's just my makeup, right? And I could force myself to drink 11,000 coffees a day, but that's not good for me. Not centering your own needs, not taking care of them, or taking care of them begrudgingly is the opposite of self-kindness. We were also conditioned that productivity and perfection were more important than just presence and compassion, self-compassion or compassion for others. That disconnection that we were just talking about, that disconnection from self, this system was created so that essentially it was only about what you could produce. It didn't matter how you felt. It didn't matter about you being around, what you had to say. What can you make to feed said system? And so that is really the root of how perfectionism and overachievement have become the way that we prove our worth. If you look at even the way that we tell people to choose their friends, you don't pick anybody that's not doing better than you. It's also very transactional, which is about how you view the value of other people, which also in turn is about how you view the value of yourself. And if something isn't up to par where you think you should be or what you have been convinced you should have or where you should be, it's going to be hard to be kind to yourself. And so you won't speak to yourself kindly, and you won't necessarily treat yourself kindly because you're going to go until you reach whatever benchmark that is. And that's usually going to be through overachievement and sometimes self-betrayal. So that goes back to that resting only when everything is done, feeling anxious when you're doing nothing, which means you get up and go do something productive and now you exhausted and burnt out and we can't figure out what that cycle is. Okay, I don't do that either. Talking down to yourself when you mess up and skipping over your progress if it's not flawless. Yeah. The bottom line is that this has created a norm for a lot of us where the only thing that matters to us is what we're producing. And we don't necessarily see it that way, but we see self-compassion as a luxury. And like we need to earn things like love and rest and joy through perfection only. And this last one is that we come from lineages, many of us, where survival is more important than softness. There was a time that self-kindness was a luxury. But if you're in a system where you have to survive the way that you're told to survive or else, self-kindness does become a luxury that you cannot afford. Strength is a requirement. Softness is a risk. These oppressive systems have to suppress softness and marginalize people because softness leads to feelings and feelings lead to resistance. So think righteous rage. Exactly. So tenderness became dangerous, and that's from who was at the top bringing it on down, and it was internalized. And so the people who loved you were very much discouraging you from being tender or gentle with anything, including yourself, because it would be dangerous for you. And so as a result, after all this time, because we're getting these messages from the people who love us and who are here to protect us, and we're internalizing them, that's resulted in feeling really uncomfortable when we have asked for help or feel emotionally exposed, and just being uncomfortable with feelings in general. It feels dangerous, right? Vulnerability also feels dangerous. Expecting yourself to suck it up and keep it moving no matter how you feel. And there are real, both mental and emotional, but also physical implications to making that decision rather than honoring what's happening with you and your body and your spirit. And it is really hard to be kind to yourself when you are judging yourself for the feelings you're having. You can't honor them if you're resentful of them and they are dangerous and you're just trying to avoid them. And I just want to add, like, the word that I keep seeing, it keeps being put in front of my eyes is the word shame and like undue shame. All of these reasons why we struggle with self-compassion are somehow connected to a shame. So maybe it's, a shame of feeling like who you are naturally is like the wrong kind of person. So maybe like you think differently or you look differently or you speak differently or whatever, you work differently, right? Or shame connected to achievements or trying to outrun shame via achievements. Like, I feel like I'm behind. If I don't reach this goal by this time, I'm not going to be okay. You may not use the language of shame, but it is connected to shame. And I'm pointing out the system that's underneath it because it is so important to understand you're carrying shame that's not even yours. These are ideas that were put in place by people who didn't have your best interest at heart or in mind. And so anything that you can do to rid yourself of them, please do. This whole thing is much bigger than us. It is much older than us. It is a scheme set up by Todd. I'm going to be honest. And it was never built with your wellness in mind. These systems don't want you to love yourself. They don't want you to be kind to yourself. And so anything you do to do so is radical. And it's how you reclaim yourself. It's how you reclaim your rhythm, your own voice, and your worth. It can be challenging work. It can be really eye-opening and jarring. And what I want to offer to you is a suggestion to take it easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself. As we said, treat yourself with compassion and gentleness as you undo and unlearn things that's not even your fault that you got to undo and unlearn. So I eased my way into self-kindness work. I've definitely spoken about self-discovery and the importance of it before. I'm going to say it always because I think that is almost like the key. And in trying to learn more about myself, it turned into decolonization work because I was trying to learn about me and basically how I got to the place I was in. And that upbringing does not exist in a vacuum. It's, again, as we talked about, this bigger system. And so the peeling back of the layers of like, oh, this is why you speak to yourself like this. Okay, this is why you view yourself like this. This is why you view who you are naturally as a problem that needs to be fixed. And discovering the root of the perspectives I had about myself and who I should be, etc., opened the door for me to explore things outside of what was normal for me, because I was able to say, oh, I actually don't accept that perspective anymore. Let me see if there are some other perspectives on who I am and how I show up that make it easier for me to be kind to myself, because I see myself as someone that I like better and I respect better, who is not a problem. Human design, found out I was a projector. Oh, you don't feel like you have a whole ton of energy. No, I don't. Oh, well, that's because you're not supposed to be doing, you're supposed to be guiding. What? Oh, I can work with what feels natural as opposed to feeling like I'm supposed to be efforting in a certain way or moving towards certain things that don't feel natural. Now what? Yeah, life-changing. And changing my perspective on a lot of my traits that I knew that I had, that I saw as problems, like I truly was able to do that. It really created space for me to fall deeply, madly in love with myself. And it is so much easier to be kind to someone that you're in love with. I also got really intentional about spending my time in spaces that were designed to affirm me, that felt kind to me, right? Like I was trusting what my body said. Oh, it feels good to be in here, right? I went to things that were unapologetically about pouring into yourself. I started going to things like the Affirmation Summit. Shout out to Aisha. It's a good friend of mine. She was not my friend at the time, but it was really a summit around pouring into yourself, being around people who were kind to themselves, and therefore it was easier to be kind to me. Really intentional about spending time in those spaces, even if I had to pay for it, because it was a valuable investment in myself. I also started getting things that said really affirmative messages. So like there's prints on my wall that had beautiful messages to and about myself. I was being Mary Janeing it up and writing things on sticky notes to put on my mirror. It was like an affirmation practice, The wallpaper on my phone and on my computers were super affirmative. I was going to flood myself. Okay, positive flooding. I was going to flood myself with kind words to myself. Those are 3 things that really supported me. A couple of them were light actions that were just really about habit, getting in the habit of being kind to myself. But that self-discovery piece and everything that came with it, that was the heavy lifting. I've mentioned examples of what it can look like to be unkind to yourself, but in case that doesn't sound like you, I'm just going to mention a couple things that are normalized now that are really self-unkindness is what I'll call it. One is being much more comfortable fixing yourself than forgiving yourself. And the next one is holding on to criticism more than compliments. So what that feels like to me is you've done a speech or a project or something, and you've gotten 10 people to tell you did an amazing job, but all you can remember is the 5 times you said, That's an example of that. Picking at yourself, kind of beating yourself up, being harder on yourself. than you probably would be anybody else you care about. And lastly, making jokes about yourself that are actually insults. And that also counts as like the shirts you wear, the mugs that you drink out of, the things you put up in your house that seem like they're snarky, but they're really you speaking negatively or poorly about yourself. That stuff matters. I think it's important to note that self-kindness doesn't mean that you lack accountability. You're treating yourself like you treat somebody else you love and care about by being honest with them, but being gentle. Like there's a way to recognize that you made a misstep or a decision you made wasn't the best one while still being gentle and kind to yourself. So yeah, it might sound like, I don't know, sis, that probably wasn't the best, but I still love you. You're still worthy. And I would even venture to say that true self-kindness shows up when you're not feeling so good about something you've done. When you feel like you failed or you're failing and you choose not to abandon or beat up on yourself. It's easier to treat yourself well when everything is going well, but it's in how you show up for yourself when things are not that really is self-kindness, in my opinion. And so if you're just starting today to pick up some of the habits of being kinder to yourself, one of the things we know we can do is speak more kindly to ourselves out loud. But I want to be specific. I'm talking about acknowledging your effort, acknowledging your accomplishments, big or small, even acknowledging your presence, just being able to be in a moment. There was absolutely a time in my life where having the ability to be present in the moment was absolutely an accomplishment. In the weeks and months prior to that, I was so focused on worrying about the future and what's going to come or ruminating about what just had happened, that little celebrations of being able to be present were valuable to me. And it helped me to keep building my self-esteem and self-worth up by acknowledging that. You got to choose your pleasure and your peace proactively. When you get that signal that you are tired or you are hungry, just start listening to it as immediately as possible and see what changes for you once you get in the rhythm of I honor my body. I am kind to my body by listening to its signals and moving accordingly. Because we've got to let go of the idea of basic self-care as something that's earned or is a luxury. We do real harm when we think that way. Also, practice sacred neutrality is what we're calling it. Basically, live in it is what it is sometimes. Not all the time, but just sometimes. This is something that's very personal to me because I am very introspective and I want to grow and I want to learn. I sometimes get in the loop of I got to figure out what it is. I'm having this feeling. What is this about? I had this exchange. What does this mean? Especially as a very intuitive person, it can turn into this loop of like, I got to pick through everything, dig everything up. And that's not innately bad, but it doesn't always serve me. It can exhaust me. And so I've started to get in the habit of being like, you know what? We don't got to figure it out today. If it's something I'm supposed to dig up, it'll show itself again. Sometimes the self-kindness is in not creating something for yourself to solve, and not making something be wrong with you and just being okay in the unknown. Also, loosen your grip. Sometimes things do start to feel tight and heavy and like things are going wrong and you have so much to do or to fix. I sometimes get overwhelmed with that. Like, well, what am I going to do first? Everything is the world is crashing down, and doing one thing at a time kind of proves to me, oh, that actually isn't true. Everything is not falling apart. Here's what I can do. And I believe and I have experienced that the steps will show themselves for you. And so sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to give yourself the space to take a deep breath, to not force yourself to overextend to figure out things. Don't put pressure on yourself. That's a part of that perfectionism. Everything has to be perfect immediately or I'm not going to be okay. We got to shift that. And finally, once we get intentional about being more kind to ourselves, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will become muscle memory immediately and it'll be really easy to do and we won't have any missteps. Realistically, there will be times that you will realize, ooh, that wasn't the kindest thing to say to myself. That's not the time to double down and beat yourself up and be all judgmental of yourself of it. That's the time to just gently say something to counteract it. Like, ooh, maybe that wasn't the kindest thing to say to myself. Let me say something different again. Let me try again. Eventually, your day-to-day life will also reflect self-kindness. It'll show up in all the small choices you make. It'll just be natural. It'll be in the way you protect your peace, in the way that you respond to and center your own needs. Whether somebody is looking or can help you to redirect or not, it can look like trusting your intuition and saying no because your spirit said no. That is the biggest one. Not having to prove that you were right, not having to get a second opinion, phone a friend. You can save yourself a whole lot of discomfort that way. Letting yourself rest before you earn it is a really big one. And it's wild because I remember when I first was like, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. I have all these things to do tonight and I'm tired. And rather than try to get them done quickly so I can go to bed, I'm going to take a nap first. And realizing how much easier and how much quicker everything got done, insanity. And then not apologizing for needing time, space, or softness to yourself or anybody else. This is what I need. I'm going to move towards it because I'm kind to myself. That's what comes natural now. It'll also start to feel different in your body when self-kindness becomes your norm. Eventually, you'll start to believe and your nervous system will follow that you are not a threat to yourself anymore. And so you'll feel more safe in your own body. There will be a space between a mistake and meltdown. If you are a person that struggles with that, the first time that happens, it feels like, oh, I actually didn't have to freak out. Wow. I still surprise myself with that ability because it doesn't always feel like it's natural, but it comes through practice. And it'll feel like trusting yourself and moving just generally in ways that feel natural. Things won't feel as forced. Listen, you don't have to be your best self or any version of yourself to be worthy of self-kindness. You don't have to immediately jump into a full practice that's perfect in order for you to be working towards treating yourself with more love and compassion. You really just have to make a choice and commit to it. You have to commit to unlearning the thought processes that got you to this point, unhooking yourself from shame that isn't yours, and be open to doing it differently. Since shame was sort of an underlining theme of this episode, I was given several truths. These are my personal truths that I wanted to share with you in case you need them. Anything that resonates, please keep. Anything that doesn't, disregard. All feelings are neutral. You don't become a bad person for feeling anger, envy, resentment, or grief. Feelings are messengers, not moral verdicts. Your needs are not a burden, no matter what anyone says. You are allowed to change your mind, full stop. There is no universal timeline. You are not behind. And you are allowed to take up space. Needing less doesn't make you better. These are the truths that have supported me in undoing a whole lot of shame, unlearning a whole lot of shame for myself. And so hopefully some of this helps you. All right, y'all know I love a reflection question. So put it in your journal, talk it out in your voice notes, speak to a friend, whatever. But what is one kind thing that you can say to yourself today? And what is one kind thing that you could believe? As I tend to say, if you are struggling with answering those questions, that's okay. Don't judge yourself, but it is an indication that it's time to look at how you are treating yourself and how you feel about yourself. With that in mind, allow me to be the first one to speak life into you today. We are pulling this week's affirmation. As usual, it is from my collection of words of encouragement called Unapologetic Affirmations. It is 100 plus reminders of all that you are and all you deserve from your boldest self. Some of the affirmations are I am statements because you need to speak over yourself. And some of the affirmations are you are statements because sometimes you need an affirmation from like your favorite auntie or me. I own every room I enter simply by being authentic. Period. Thank you for being here with me. Listen, if you are not following me already, you can find me on Instagram at Seen with Serena, on YouTube and TikTok at Serena Kumara. That's SerenaKumara. If you're not already, like, share, subscribe, honey. Send to a friend, have a watch party, listening party, whatever you need to do. And I will see you next week. Love you.